The elegant ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel buzzed with the quiet murmur of the city's elite. Karim Al-Rahman adjusted his perfectly tailored suit, fighting the urge to loosen his tie. As heir to one of the Middle East's largest business empires, he was no stranger to these lavish gatherings, but tonight felt different. The endless discussions about mergers and acquisitions had begun to wear on him, each conversation blending into the next like watercolors in the rain. He glanced at his watch, a family heirloom passed down through generations, and decided he'd fulfilled his social obligations for the evening. Rather than waiting for his driver at the main entrance, he chose to walk to the parking garage himself, seeking a moment of solitude in the cool night air. The city's skyline sparkled against the dark canvas of the night, its lights reflecting off the polished surfaces of nearby buildings. As Karim walked, his thoughts drifted to the latest expansion plans his board had proposed. The numbers were promising, but something felt off about the whole deal. He'd learned long ago to trust his instincts in business matters. Lost in thought, he barely registered taking a wrong turn until he found himself in a dimly lit alley. Before he could retrace his steps, 3 figures emerged from the shadows, their intentions clear in their predatory stance. They surrounded him, demanding his watch, wallet, and other valuables. One of them pulled out a knife, its blade catching the weak light from a distant street lamp. Karim maintained his composure, years of business negotiations having taught him the importance of appearing calm, even when your heart is racing. He was weighing his options when a firm feminine voice cut through the tension. "The police are on their way. If you're smart, you'll disappear right now." The attackers whirled around to find a woman standing at the entrance of the alley. She held a piece of metal in her hand, but it was her unwavering gaze that commanded attention. Despite her worn clothes and disheveled appearance, she exuded an air of authority that seemed almost regal. In the distance, police sirens wailed. The sound sent the attackers scrambling, their footsteps echoing off the walls as they fled into the night. Karim studied the woman carefully, noting how she maintained her defensive stance until the last attacker had disappeared from sight. "Did you really call the police?" he asked, straightening his tie. A crooked smile played across her face. "I don't even own a phone." "But they didn't know that, did they?" Her quick thinking impressed him. He reached for his wallet, intending to reward her bravery, but she held up her hand in refusal. "I don't want your charity," she said, her voice carrying a hint of an accent he couldn't quite place. "Keep your money." "Then what do you want?" Karim asked, intrigued by this mysterious woman who seemed so out of place yet so self-assured. She met his gaze directly, and in her eyes he saw something familiar, the same determination he often saw in the mirror. "A chance," she replied simply. "That's all anyone really needs." Without thinking twice, Karim pulled out his business card and handed it to her. "If you ever change your mind about that chance, come find me." He watched as she examined the card, her fingers tracing the embossed letters of his name and company. "Why would you trust a stranger from the streets?" she asked, her voice carrying a note of genuine curiosity. "Because sometimes the most valuable things in life come from unexpected places," he answered, surprising himself with his own response. "Besides, anyone who risks their safety for a stranger deserves at least the benefit of the doubt." She nodded slowly, tucking the card into her pocket. As she turned to leave, Karim called out, "I never got your name." She paused, looking back over her shoulder. "Sarah," she replied, then disappeared into the shadows, leaving Karim with an inexplicable feeling that this wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed. 2 days later, Sarah stood in the gleaming lobby of Al-Rahman International, her worn clothes drawing curious glances from employees in pristine business attire. The security guard at the front desk eyed her suspiciously as she approached, but she held her ground, presenting Karim's business card with unwavering confidence. "Mr. Al-Rahman is expecting me," she stated, though it wasn't entirely true. The guard's skepticism was evident, but after a brief phone call to the executive floor, he reluctantly issued her a visitor's badge. As the elevator climbed to the top floor, Sarah caught her reflection in the polished walls. Her appearance was a stark contrast to the luxury surrounding her, but her posture remained proud and dignified. The doors opened to reveal a stunning office space with panoramic views of the city skyline. Karim's assistant, Linda, greeted her with barely concealed disdain. "Mr. Al-Rahman is in a meeting," she said, her tone suggesting Sarah should leave. "Perhaps you could come back another time." "I'll wait," Sarah replied, settling into one of the leather chairs in the reception area. Hours passed and still she waited, watching as other visitors and employees came and went. Some whispered and pointed, while others simply pretended she didn't exist. Finally, late in the afternoon, Karim emerged from his office, surprised to find her still there. "Sarah, how long have you been waiting?" "Since this morning," she answered, rising to her feet. "Your assistant suggested I leave several times, but I've learned that persistence often pays off." A smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Come in," he said, gesturing toward his office. Once inside, he motioned for her to take a seat across from his desk. "I have to admit I wasn't sure you'd come." "Neither was I," she confessed, her eyes taking in the sophisticated decor of his office. "But sometimes you have to take risks to change your life." Karim studied her for a moment, noting how she sat with perfect posture despite her apparent circumstances. "Why are you here, Sarah?" "You offered me a chance," she replied, meeting his gaze. "I'm here to take it." "And what exactly would you do with that chance?" Without hesitation, she pointed to a stack of financial reports on his desk. "I noticed some discrepancies in the quarterly projections posted in your lobby. Your Asian division is underreporting their expenses by at least 15%, and your European merger calculations don't account for the recent changes in EU trade regulations." Karim's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He pulled the reports closer, scanning the numbers. "How did you—" "I understand numbers," she said simply, "and people. Both can tell you stories if you know how to listen." Intrigued, Karim leaned back in his chair. "Tell me more about these discrepancies." For the next hour, Sarah broke down complex financial data with the expertise of a seasoned analyst. She identified potential risks and opportunities that had escaped his team's notice, speaking with the confidence of someone who had spent years in the business world. "Where did you learn all this?" he asked, genuinely impressed. A shadow crossed her face. "Let's just say I had a different life before. One that taught me many things." Karim sensed there was much more to her story, but he also recognized the wall she had built around her past. Instead of pressing further, he made a decision that surprised even himself. "I need an assistant," he said. "Someone who can see what others miss. Someone who isn't afraid to speak the truth even when it's uncomfortable." Sarah's expression remained neutral, but her eyes betrayed a glimmer of hope. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you that chance you asked for," he replied. "The question is, what will you do with it?" "When do I start?" "Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp." He paused, then added, "Though you might want to visit the boutique downstairs first. Linda can help you with that." For the first time since he'd met her, Sarah's composed facade cracked slightly, revealing genuine emotion. "Thank you, Mr. Al-Rahman." "Karim," he corrected. "If we're going to work together, call me Karim." As she left his office, Karim couldn't shake the feeling that he had just set something significant in motion. There was something about Sarah, a mystery that needed solving. But for now, he had more pressing matters to attend to, like explaining to his board why he had just hired a homeless woman as his personal assistant. The transformation was remarkable. In just a few weeks, Sarah had become an indispensable part of Al-Rahman International. Her keen eye for detail and sharp business acumen had already saved the company millions in potential losses. She moved through the office with grace and authority, her designer suits and perfectly styled hair, making it impossible to imagine she had ever lived on the streets. However, her sudden rise didn't go unnoticed. Whispers followed her through. The corridors and suspicious glances were exchanged during meetings. Linda, who had been forced to help with Sarah's makeover, spread rumors about her mysterious background. "It doesn't make sense," Linda complained to a group of executives in the break room. "How does someone go from the streets to understanding complex international finance? She must be hiding something." The speculation grew when Sarah successfully negotiated a difficult contract with a Japanese firm, speaking fluent Japanese and demonstrating an intimate knowledge of Asian business customs. She hadn't just learned these skills, she had lived them. One afternoon, Karim found her in his office reviewing a stack of old company files. "You've exceeded all my expectations," he said, closing the door behind him. Sarah looked up, her expression guarded. "But you have questions." "Several," he admitted, taking a seat across from her. "Your knowledge of international business practices, your understanding of global markets, your language skills, these aren't things you learn on the streets." "No," she agreed, "they aren't." "Who are you really, Sarah?" She carefully closed the file she was reviewing. "Someone who lost everything and had to start over. Isn't that enough?" "It would be if you weren't so obviously familiar with our biggest competitor in Dubai." Karim pulled out a photograph from a recent business conference. "You flinched when you saw Hassan Abdullah's name in the report yesterday. Most people wouldn't even know who he is." Sarah's composure wavered slightly. "Mr. Abdullah has a reputation in certain circles." "Yes, he does. He's also known for his ruthless business tactics and mysterious rise to power 5 years ago, right after the sudden collapse of one of the region's oldest family businesses." Karim leaned forward. "The same time you appeared on the streets." The tension in the room was palpable. Sarah stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. "The past should stay in the past. Not when it might affect my company," Karim insisted. "I took a chance on you, Sarah. I need to know if that was a mistake." She turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and determination. "Everything I've done here has been to help your company succeed. Check my work, verify my results. You won't find a single mistake or questionable decision." "That's not what concerns me," Karim said softly. "What concerns me is the way you scrutinize every document related to our Middle Eastern operations. The way you triple-check every contract before it goes to our Dubai office. You're not just being thorough, you're looking for something." Sarah's silence spoke volumes. "Are you going to tell me what it is?" Karim pressed. "I can't," she whispered. "Not yet. But I promise you, I'm not here to harm your company or you. Sometimes the truth is more complicated than it appears." Karim studied her for a long moment. His instincts had never led him wrong in business, and right now, they were telling him two things. Sarah was definitely hiding something significant, but she wasn't a threat to his company. "All right," he finally said. "Keep your secrets for now, but remember, whatever you're involved in, whatever you're looking for, you're not alone anymore. When you're ready to talk, I'm here." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Thank you, Karim, for everything." As she left his office, Karim couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something much bigger than he realized. He pulled up Hassan Abdullah's company profile on his computer, examining the businessman's photo with newfound interest. What was the connection between this powerful magnate and his mysterious assistant? And more importantly, what was Sarah really looking for in his company's records? The answers, he suspected, would change everything. But for now, all he could do was wait and watch, hoping he hadn't made a terrible mistake in trusting someone whose past was clearly more complicated than he could imagine. The annual Middle Eastern Business Summit was approaching, and Al Rahman International was hosting this year's event. The grand ballroom of the company's headquarters buzzed with activity, as workers prepared for the arrival of the region's most influential business leaders. Sarah supervised every detail with meticulous attention, but her usual composure showed signs of strain. "The guest list just arrived from Dubai," Linda announced, dropping a thick folder on Sarah's desk. Hassan Abdullah confirmed his attendance personally. Sarah's hand froze over the seating arrangement she'd been working on. For a brief moment, her mask of professional detachment slipped, revealing a flash of raw emotion. She quickly recovered, but not before Linda noticed, adding this reaction to her growing list of suspicious behavior. Later that evening, as the office emptied, Karim found Sarah still at her desk, poring over old financial records. "You should go home," he said. "The summit isn't for another week." "Just double-checking some details," she replied, not looking up from the documents. Karim sat on the edge of her desk. You've been double-checking details every night this week. What are you really looking for? Sarah finally met his gaze, dark circles under her eyes betraying her exhaustion. Patterns, she said. Connections. 5 years ago, Hassan Abdullah's company suddenly acquired multiple businesses across the region. The timing and methods were unusual. Unusual how? Each company faced a series of strategic setbacks before the acquisition. Supply chain disruptions, cancelled contracts, suspicious financial audits. It was systematic, calculated. She hesitated, then added, like what happened to my family's company. Karim's eyes widened at this first admission about her past. Your family's company? Sarah stood abruptly, walking to the window. The city lights twinkled below, a stark contrast to the darkness of her memories. The Al-Rashid Group. We were one of the largest import and construction companies in the region. Al-Rashid? Karim's mind raced. Wait, you're Sarah Al-Rashid? The heiress who disappeared after the company's collapse? I was, she corrected. Now I'm just Sarah. But why didn't you seek help? Your family had powerful connections. Those connections disappeared when our money did. Her bitter laugh held years of pain. Besides, Hassan Abdullah made sure we had nowhere to turn. He systematically destroyed every relationship we had built over generations. Karim moved closer, his voice gentle. What aren't you telling me, Sarah? She turned to face him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. When everything was lost, my father made a deal with Abdullah, the remains of our company in exchange for me, a marriage to unite what was left of our assets with his empire. But you refused. I refused to be traded like a commodity, she said fiercely. I refused to marry the man who destroyed everything my family had built. So I ran, disappeared, into the streets where no one would think to look for an heiress. Karim processed this revelation, pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. And now Abdullah is coming to the summit. Is that why you've been searching through our records? What are you hoping to find? Evidence, Sarah replied, her voice strengthening with determination. Proof of how he did it, not just to my family but to others. Your company's archives go back decades. There are patterns here, Karim, trails that even he couldn't completely hide. Sarah, Karim's tone held a warning. Whatever you're planning. I'm not planning anything, she interrupted. I'm just looking for the truth. Don't you want to know if you've been doing business with someone who destroys companies for sport? Before Karim could respond, his phone buzzed with a message. His face darkened as he read it. It seems we're not the only ones digging into the past, he said, showing her the screen. Abdullah's representatives just requested detailed information about all our recent hires, specifically in executive positions. Sarah's face paled. He knows I'm here. Not yet, Karim assured her. But he's suspicious. We need to be careful. Maybe I should leave, Sarah suggested, though the words clearly pained her. I never meant to put your company at risk. Karim caught her arm as she moved to gather her things. Running once was brave. Running again would be giving up. Besides, he added with a slight smile, I have a better idea. What do you mean? If Abdullah wants to play games, let's play. But this time you're not alone. You have the resources of Al-Rahman International behind you. His eyes held a determined glint. It's time to show him that some patterns are meant to be broken. Sarah studied him for a long moment, hope warring with fear in her expression. Why would you risk helping me? Because you're right, the truth matters, and because... He paused, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Because I've come to care about what happens to you. The air between them crackled with unspoken emotions. Before either could address the moment, Linda's voice cut through the tension. Mr. Al-Rahman, the Dubai office is on line 1. They say it's urgent. The spell broken, Sarah stepped back, professional mask sliding back into place. We should get back to work. The summit won't plan itself. Karim nodded, but as he walked to his office, he couldn't shake the feeling that the upcoming summit would be about much more than business. A storm was brewing and Sarah was at its center. The question was, would they emerge stronger, or would the past finally catch up with them both? The day of the Middle Eastern Business Summit arrived with an air of anticipation. The Al Rahman International headquarters had been transformed into a showcase of luxury and power. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the marble floors, while elaborate floral arrangements perfumed the air. Security was tight, with discreet earpieces and watchful eyes monitoring every corner. Sarah stood before the mirror in her office, adjusting her elegant navy blue suit. Her heart raced beneath her calm exterior as she prepared to face the man who had destroyed her family. A soft knock at the door made her turn. "You look perfect," Karim said, entering with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one, their fingers brushing briefly. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, taking a sip to steady her nerves. "The files we found are safely encrypted and backed up in multiple locations," he assured her. "Abdullah won't be able to touch them." Their investigation had revealed a disturbing pattern in Abdullah's business practices. Company after company had fallen victim to his sophisticated manipulation of markets and contracts. The evidence was circumstantial but damning, a web of shell companies, suspicious financial transactions, and conveniently timed accidents that had cleared his path to power. "Remember the plan," Karim said softly. "We just need to get through today. Keep him comfortable, unsuspecting." Sarah nodded, though her stomach churned at the thought of playing nice with Hassan Abdullah. "It's ironic," she mused. 5 years. How ago I was supposed to marry him. Now I have to pretend I don't know who he is." Karim's jaw tightened at the mention of the arranged marriage. Over the past weeks, his feelings for Sarah had grown beyond professional admiration, though he'd kept them carefully guarded. "You don't have to do this," he offered. "I can handle the summit alone." "Yes, I do," she insisted. "I need to face him. I need him to know he didn't break me." The first guests began arriving, filling the grand ballroom with the murmur of multiple languages and the subtle display of wealth and influence. Sarah moved through the crowd with practiced ease, greeting delegates and managing the flow of the event. But her attention kept drifting to the entrance, waiting for the moment she dreaded and anticipated in equal measure. Hassan Abdullah arrived fashionably late, his presence commanding immediate attention. He was shorter than Sarah remembered, but his aura of power remained unchanged. His calculating eyes swept the room as he moved through the crowd, accepting greetings with practiced charm. Karim intercepted him first, playing the perfect host. "Mr. Abdullah, welcome to Al Rahman International. We're honored by your presence." "The honor is mine," Abdullah replied smoothly. "Your company's recent successes have caught everyone's attention, particularly your expansion into the Asian markets. I have my team to thank for that," Karim said, gesturing to where Sarah stood across the room. "In fact, let me introduce you to my senior assistant. She's been instrumental in our recent achievements." Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. As she approached, years of aristocratic training keeping her expression pleasantly neutral. "Mr. Abdullah, welcome," she said, extending her hand. Abdullah took it, his grip firm and cold. For a moment something flickered in his eyes, a flash of recognition quickly masked by polite interest. "Thank you." "Miss Sarah Williams," she supplied, using the alias she'd adopted. "I've heard so much about your work in Dubai." "Have you?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'd love to hear your thoughts on the market sometime, perhaps over dinner." The suggestion carried a subtle threat, and Sarah felt Karim tense beside her. "Unfortunately, my schedule is quite full with the summit," she deflected smoothly. "But I'm sure we'll have time to discuss business during the presentations." Abdullah's gaze lingered on her face, studying her features with unsettling intensity. "You remind me of someone I knew once," he said casually. "A beautiful young woman from a very prominent family. Such a tragedy. What happened to them?" "The business world can be unpredictable," Sarah replied, maintaining her composure even as her pulse raced. "Success and failure often hinge on the smallest details." "Indeed they do," Abdullah agreed, his tone carrying a hint of menace. "It's fascinating how things that seem lost can suddenly reappear, isn't it?" Before Sarah could respond, Karim smoothly steered the conversation toward safer topics. But the message had been clear. Abdullah suspected something. The question was, how much did he know? As the evening progressed, Sarah could feel Abdullah's eyes following her around the room. She maintained her professional demeanor, but inside, her mind raced with possibilities. Had they been too obvious in their investigation? Had someone betrayed their efforts? During a brief moment alone, Karim found her in a quiet corner. "He knows something," she whispered urgently. "But he can't prove anything," Karim assured her, his hand resting protectively on her lower back. "We've been careful." "Careful might not be enough," Sarah said, watching Abdullah charm a group of investors across the room. "He's dangerous when he feels threatened." "You're not alone this time," Karim reminded her, his voice fierce with determination. "Whatever he's planning, we'll face it together." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the crowded ballroom faded away. The connection between them had grown stronger with each passing day, built on trust, respect, and something deeper neither had dared to name. But the moment was interrupted by Linda's urgent approach. "Mr. Al-Rahman, there's a situation that requires your immediate attention. Someone's trying to access our secure servers." The attack had begun just as they had feared. The question now was, could their carefully laid plans withstand the storm that was about to break? The Al-Rahman International IT department buzzed with frantic energy as technicians worked to repel the cyber attack. Sarah and Karim stood behind the lead security analyst, watching as lines of code flashed across multiple screens. "They're targeting specific folders," the analyst explained, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Historical financial records, personnel files, anything related to our Middle Eastern operations." "Can you trace the source?" Karim asked, though they all suspected who was behind it. "They're bouncing through servers across the globe, but—" The analyst paused, squinting at the screen. "The attack pattern matches one we've seen before, during the attempted breach last month." Sarah exchanged a meaningful look with Karim. They had anticipated this move, prepared for it, but the reality was still unsettling. Back in the ballroom, Hassan Abdullah continued to charm investors, playing his part perfectly, while his digital assassins attempted to strip away Sarah's carefully constructed new identity. "The defensive protocols are holding," the analyst reported, "but they're persistent and sophisticated." "Keep me updated," Karim ordered, guiding Sarah out of the IT department. In the privacy of the elevator, he finally spoke what they were both thinking. "He's making his move." "This is just the beginning," Sarah warned. "Abdullah never strikes from just one direction." As if confirming her words, Linda rushed up to them as soon as they returned to the executive floor. "Mr. Al-Rahman, the Reuters reporter is asking about rumors of irregularities in our recent hiring practices. They're particularly interested in background checks for senior positions." "Plant a story about our innovative recruitment program," Sarah suggested quickly. "Focus on how we're breaking traditional barriers, giving opportunities to unconventional candidates. Make it about corporate social responsibility." Karim nodded approvingly. "Good thinking, Linda, get PR on it immediately." But the hits kept coming. Throughout the evening, they dealt with a series of calculated attacks, whispered rumors among the delegates, probing questions about Sarah's background, and subtle implications about the company's integrity. During a brief respite, Sarah found herself alone on the balcony, trying to catch her breath. The city sprawled before her, a maze of lights and shadows that reminded her of her own complicated path. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Hassan Abdullah's voice sent a chill down her spine. She hadn't heard him approach. "Mr. Abdullah," she acknowledged, maintaining her professional mask. "Are you enjoying the summit?" "Immensely." He moved to stand beside her, too close for comfort. "You know, I've been thinking about why you seem so familiar. Those eyes, they remind me of someone I almost married once." Sarah's heart raced, but her voice remained steady. "That's quite a coincidence." "I don't believe in coincidences, Miss Williams. Or should I say, Miss Al-Rashid." His tone was soft but menacing. "You've done well for yourself. Street life to executive assistant. It's quite the fairy tale." "I'm afraid you're mistaken," Sarah replied coolly, "though I'm curious why you're so interested in my background." Abdullah's laugh held no warmth. "Let's stop playing games. Sarah, we both know who you are. The question is, does Karim know what you're really doing here?" Does he know you're using his company to dig into the past? Are you threatening me, Mr. Abdullah? Threatening? No, my dear. I'm offering you a chance to walk away before history repeats itself. He turned to face her fully. Your father made the wrong choice 5 years ago. Don't make the same mistake. The only mistake was trusting you, Sarah said, her composure finally cracking. You destroyed my family's legacy. I gave them a chance to survive. They chose pride over pragmatism. His eyes hardened. Just as you're choosing revenge over reason. You're wrong, Karim's voice cut through the tension. He stood in the doorway, his expression fierce. She chose justice over fear. Abdullah's smile turned predatory. Ah, the knight in shining armor arrives. Tell me, Karim, do you really know who you're protecting? What she's capable of? I know exactly who she is, Karim stated firmly, moving to stand beside Sarah. The question is, do your investors know who you really are? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Abdullah's face. Careful, Karim. You're playing a dangerous game. No, Hassan, Sarah interjected, drawing strength from Karim's presence. The game is over. We have proof of everything. The manipulated contracts, the shell companies, the systematic destruction of competing businesses, including my family's. Proof? Abdullah scoffed, but there was a note of worry in his voice. You have nothing but circumstantial evidence and bitter memories. Are you willing to bet your empire on that? Karim challenged, because tomorrow's presentation about market manipulation and corporate responsibility might interest you. The threat hung in the air between them. Finally, Abdullah straightened his jacket, his mask of civility firmly back in place. Well, tomorrow should be fascinating then. Enjoy your evening. He paused at the doorway. Oh, and Sarah, you might want to check on those backup servers you think are so secure. As his footsteps faded, Sarah turned to Karim. He's not bluffing. He's going to try to destroy everything, you, your company, all of it. Let him try, Karim said, his hand finding hers. We've planned for this. Every contingency, every attack vector, we're ready. But as they looked out over the city together, both knew that the real battle was just beginning. Abdullah had resources they couldn't imagine, and a reputation for crushing anyone who stood in his way. The next 24 hours would determine not just their future, but the fate of everything they had worked to build. The night following the summit was a blur of activity at Al Rahman International. Sarah and Karim worked tirelessly with their team, preparing for what they knew would be Abdullah's counterattack. The evidence they had gathered was substantial: years of financial records, witness statements, and a complex web of shell companies that all led back to Abdullah's systematic destruction of competing businesses. The backup servers in Switzerland are secure, Sarah reported, rubbing her tired eyes. Everything is triple encrypted and stored in multiple locations. Karim watched her from across his office, concern evident in his expression. You should rest. Tomorrow's presentation. I can't rest, she interrupted, pacing the room. Abdullah's threat about the backup servers, he was too confident. He knows something we don't. As if on cue, Linda burst into the office, her usually perfect composure shaken. We have a problem. Someone's leaked photos to the press, old. Photos of Sarah with her family. Side by side with surveillance pictures of her living on the streets. The story's already trending on social media. Sarah's face paled, but her voice remained steady. He's trying to discredit me before the presentation, make it look like I'm a fraud. That's not all, Linda continued, handing them her tablet. There's speculation about your relationship with Mr. Al-Rahman, suggesting this whole thing is an elaborate revenge scheme, with him as an unwitting pawn. Karim slammed his hand on the desk. That's ridiculous. The evidence stands on its own, regardless of Sarah's identity. But perception matters, Sarah said quietly, especially with the investors. If they doubt my credibility, they might not. Listen to what we have to say tomorrow. The weight of the situation settled over them. Years of careful planning threatened to unravel because of a few well-placed photographs and rumors. Sarah moved to the window, watching the first hints of dawn color the sky. Maybe, she began hesitantly, maybe I should step back. Let you present the findings alone. Absolutely not, Karim said firmly. moving to stand beside her. "That's exactly what Abdullah wants. To make you hide again. To make you feel powerless." "He's right," Linda unexpectedly chimed in. "Besides, I may have a solution." They both turned to look at her. "If Abdullah wants to play the media game, let's beat him at it. Instead of hiding from your past, why not embrace it?" A slow smile spread across Sarah's face as she caught Linda's meaning. "You want me to tell my story first, on my terms?" "Exactly," Linda nodded. "I have contacts at several major news outlets. We can give them an exclusive interview right now, before the presentation. The lost heiress who fought her way back from the streets to expose corporate corruption. It's the kind of story people love." "It's risky," Karim warned. "Once the story's out there, there's no going back." "I'm tired of hiding," Sarah decided. "I'm tired of letting him control the narrative." She turned to Linda. "Make the calls, but I have one condition. We do. This live. No editing, no spin, just the truth." The next few hours were a whirlwind. Sarah sat before cameras in Karim's office, her poise and eloquence turning what could have been a scandal into a compelling story of resilience and justice. She spoke candidly about her family's fall from grace, her time on the streets, and her determination to expose the truth about corporate manipulation. "I didn't choose this fight," she told the interviewer, her voice strong and clear. "But when I saw the same patterns that destroyed my family being repeated with other companies, I couldn't stay silent. This isn't about revenge. It's about preventing more families from losing everything they've built." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with support, and financial news channels began running special reports on corporate takeover tactics. By mid-morning, Abdullah's carefully crafted narrative was crumbling. "The presentation starts in an hour," Karim reminded her as the media crew packed up their equipment. "Are you ready?" Sarah straightened her jacket, a new confidence in her bearing. "More than ready. But there's something I need to tell you first." She took a deep breath. "These past months, working with you, believing in me when no one else would, it's meant more than I can say." Karim stepped closer, his voice soft. "Sarah, But before he could finish, his phone buzzed urgently. The message made his blood run cold. Abdullah's called an emergency board meeting. He's making a move to take control of his company before we can present the evidence. Sarah's eyes widened. He's trying to consolidate power, silence any potential opposition. "We need to move now," Karim decided. "The presentation, the evidence, everything, we can't wait." As they rushed to gather their materials, Sarah caught his arm. "Whatever happens in there, I want you to know something. My feelings for you, they're real. They have nothing to do with revenge or justice. They're the one thing in all of this that Abdullah can't touch." Their eyes met, years of pain and hope and unspoken feelings passing between them. But there was no time for more. The final battle was about to begin, and everything they had fought for hung in the balance. The main conference room of Al Rahman International was packed with board members, investors, and media representatives. The tension in the air was palpable as Sarah and Karim made their way to the front of the room. Hassan Abdullah sat in the front row, his usual smug expression replaced by barely contained anger. "Before we begin," Abdullah announced, standing suddenly, "I feel it's my duty to inform the board about a serious security breach within Al Rahman International." He gestured to his assistant, who began distributing folders. "We have evidence that certain individuals have been accessing confidential company records without authorization." Karim stepped forward, his voice steady. "If you're referring to our investigation into market manipulation and corporate fraud, we have full authorization from the board. In fact, that's exactly what we're here to discuss." "This presentation," Sarah added, taking her place beside Karim, "will demonstrate how specific companies in our region have been systematically targeted, weakened, and then acquired through illegal means." Abdullah's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "And we're supposed to trust the word of a woman who spent years living on the streets, who infiltrated this company under false pretenses." "My past is no longer a secret, Mr. Abdullah," Sarah replied calmly. "As I explained in this morning's interview, I've lived through the devastating effects of corporate manipulation. That experience has only strengthened my commitment to exposing the truth." The presentation began, and Sarah methodically laid out their evidence. Financial records flashed across the screen, showing patterns of suspicious transactions. Company after company had fallen victim to the same tactics: sudden contract cancellations, mysterious audit findings, orchestrated supply chain disruptions. "The pattern is clear," she explained, her voice growing stronger with each revelation. "These weren't random business failures. They were carefully orchestrated attacks, designed to devalue companies before they were acquired at a fraction of their worth." Abdullah shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Sarah connected the dots between his shell companies and the systematic destruction of competing businesses. The board members whispered among themselves, their expressions growing increasingly concerned. "This is absurd," Abdullah interrupted, standing again. "These are nothing but coincidences and conspiracy theories. Besides, you have no proof that any laws were broken." "Actually," Karim interjected, "we do." He nodded to Linda, who distributed another set of documents. "These are sworn statements from former employees of Abdullah Enterprises, detailing specific instances of market manipulation and corporate espionage." The room erupted in murmurs as board members and investors pored over the documents. Abdullah's face darkened with rage. "You're playing a dangerous game, Karim. Have you considered what these baseless accusations could do to regional market stability?" "We've considered everything," Sarah replied, "including the 3 attempts to hack our servers last night, traced back to IP addresses registered to your company." Suddenly, Abdullah's phone buzzed. His face paled as he read the message. His own board of directors, watching the presentation via video link, had called an emergency session. The evidence was too substantial to ignore. "You think you've won?" Abdullah snarled, his composed facade finally cracking. "You have no idea what I'm capable of. One phone call and I can still destroy everything you've built." "No, Hassan," Sarah said firmly, "you can't, not anymore." She pressed a button on her laptop and new information filled the screens. "While you were focused on discrediting me, we were following the money. Every transaction, every shell company, every hidden account. It's all here." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Years of financial manipulation and corporate wrongdoing laid bare for all to see. Abdullah's phone buzzed again. His company's stock was already plummeting. "The authorities have been notified," Karim announced. "All relevant evidence has been provided to regulatory agencies in 3 countries. It's over." Abdullah lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. "You vindictive little—" Security intercepted him before he could reach Sarah, but his voice carried across the room. "This isn't over. I still have friends in high places." "So do we," Karim replied calmly, his hand finding Sarah's. "The difference is our friends believe in justice." As security escorted Abdullah from the room, the board members approached Karim and Sarah. Their expressions were a mixture of shock, admiration, and concern about the challenges ahead. The exposure of such widespread corruption would have far-reaching consequences for the entire business community. Miss Al-Rashid, one of the senior board members, said, "I knew your father. He was a man of integrity. Today, you've honored his legacy." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but she held them back. "Thank you, but this isn't just about my family anymore. It's about protecting all the other families who could fall victim to corporate predators." As the room slowly emptied, Karim turned to Sarah. "Are you all right?" She nodded, finally allowing herself to tremble slightly. "I've imagined this moment for so long. I thought I would feel triumphant, but instead I just feel free," Karim finished for her, understanding in his eyes. He pulled her close, no longer caring who might see. "You're finally free." But as they stood there, surrounded by the aftermath of their victory, both knew that Abdullah's final words carried a warning. The fight wasn't completely over. There would be legal battles ahead, attempts at retaliation, and the challenging task of rebuilding trust in the business community. Yet for the first time in years, Sarah felt hope overwhelming her fear. She had reclaimed her identity, exposed the truth, and found something she never expected, a partner who believed in justice as much as she did. The question now was, where would this newfound freedom take them? The weeks following Abdullah's exposure were a whirlwind of activity. The business world was still reeling from the revelations, and Al Rahman International found itself at the center of a media storm. Sarah's story had captured the public's imagination, the fallen heiress who had fought her way back from the streets to expose corporate corruption. In Karim's office, Sarah sat reviewing the latest news reports. The headlines were still dominated by the ongoing investigations into Abdullah's business empire. His assets had been frozen, and regulatory agencies from multiple countries were uncovering more evidence of wrongdoing with each passing day. "Your father's old partners called again," Karim said, entering the office with 2 cups of coffee. "They want to discuss reinstating some of your family's old contracts, now that Abdullah's influence is gone." Sarah accepted the coffee with a grateful smile. "It's strange. All these people who abandoned us 5 years ago are suddenly eager to reconnect. Success has a way of refreshing people's memories," Karim observed, sitting beside her. "The question is, what do you want to do now?" It was a loaded question. The exposure of Abdullah's crimes had opened up possibilities Sarah hadn't dared to dream about for years. There was talk of recovering some of her family's assets, rebuilding what had been lost. But something had changed within her. "I've been thinking," she said slowly, "about all the people I met during my time on the streets. People with potential, with dreams, who just needed a chance like the one you gave me." Karim's eyes softened with understanding. "You want to help them?" "I want to create a foundation," Sarah explained, her voice growing animated. "Not just for charity, but for opportunity. Job training, education, small business loans, a real chance for people to rebuild their lives. Using your experience to help others." Karim nodded approvingly. "It's perfect." "There's more," Sarah continued, pulling out a folder. "I've been researching other companies that were targeted by Abdullah over the years. Some of them might be salvageable with the right investment and leadership." Karim took the folder, scanning the contents with interest. "You want to rebuild them? Not just rebuild, transform. Make them stronger, more ethical, more focused on sustainable growth rather than just profit." She paused, suddenly uncertain. "But I'd need help. Partners who believe in the same vision." "Partners?" Karim's lips curved into a smile. "Or just one partner in particular?" Sarah felt her cheeks warm. Their relationship had evolved in ways she hadn't expected. What had started as professional respect had grown into something deeper, more meaningful. But they hadn't yet put it into words, both focused on dealing with the aftermath of Abdullah's exposure. "Karim," she began, but he gently interrupted. "Her. Before you continue, there's something I need to say." He took her hand, his expression serious. "These past months, watching you fight for justice, seeing your strength and determination, I've never met anyone like you, Sarah. You could have chosen revenge, but instead, you chose to fight for something bigger than yourself." "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied softly. "You believed in me when you had every reason to doubt. Because I saw who you really are. Not just Sarah al-Rashid, the heiress, or Sarah Williams, the assistant, but Sarah, the woman who refuses to let adversity break her spirit." He squeezed her hand. "The woman I've fallen in love with." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The words she'd been afraid to acknowledge hung between them, full of promise and possibility. "Sauta, I know this might complicate things," Karim continued. "The business world already has enough to gossip about, but I don't care. Whatever you want to build, the foundation, the recovered companies, a new future, I want to build it with you, as equals, as partners in every sense." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have since that night in the alley when you offered me a chance without asking for anything in return." Karim drew her close, their foreheads touching. The city stretched out below them, the same view they'd shared so many times before. But now it felt different, full of promise rather than shadows. A knock at the door interrupted their moment. Linda entered, carrying a stack of papers. "Sorry to interrupt, but the press is requesting interviews about the new foundation." Apparently, word's already leaked about the plans. Sarah and Karim exchanged knowing looks. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be skeptics to convince, challenges to overcome, and possibly even resistance from those who preferred the old way of doing business, but they would face it together. Tell them we'll make an announcement next week, Karim decided, a proper launch for the foundation and our new business initiative. Linda's eyes darted between them, noting their clasped hands and intimate posture. A small smile played at her lips. Should I include any personal announcements in the press release? Sarah laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. One step at a time, Linda. Let's change the business world first, then we'll give them something new to talk about. As Linda left, Karim pulled Sarah to her feet. Speaking of next steps, have dinner with me tonight? Not as colleagues or business partners, but just us. Just us, Sarah agreed, her heart full. I like the sound of that. Their first official date was anything but conventional. Instead of choosing an upscale restaurant, Sarah suggested they visit her old haunts in the city. She wanted Karim to understand every part of her journey, even the painful chapters. They walked through the alleyways where she had once sought shelter, now with a different purpose in mind. This is where I want to build the first community center, Sarah explained, gesturing to an abandoned warehouse. Job training facilities on the ground floor, temporary housing above, and a medical clinic in the annex. Karim surveyed the building with a developer's eye. It'll need complete renovation, but the structure's solid. We could have it operational within 6 months. We? Sarah raised an eyebrow, a playful smile on her lips. Yes, we, he confirmed, pulling her close. I told you, whatever you want to build, I'm in. Besides, he added with a grin, someone needs to handle the boring financial details while you're out there changing the world. They continued their walk, stopping at a small Middle Eastern restaurant tucked away in a quiet corner. The elderly owner recognized Sarah immediately, rushing out to greet her with tears in his eyes. Miss Sarah, Allah be praised. He embraced her warmly. We saw you on the news, but I couldn't believe it until now. Sarah hugged him back, then turned to Karim. Mr. Ahmed gave me meals when I had nothing, refused to let me pay him back when I finally had money. You were kind to my wife when she was ill, Ahmed said firmly. Some debts can't be repaid with money. They spent the evening in the restaurant's cozy back room, sharing stories and traditional dishes. Ahmed's wife joined them, fussing over Sarah and not so subtly hinting about wedding plans. Rather than feeling uncomfortable, Sarah found herself imagining a future she'd never dared to dream about before. Later, walking along the waterfront, Karim noticed Sarah's thoughtful expression. What's on your mind? I was thinking about legacy, she replied, watching the moonlight dance on the water. Not just family names or business empires, but the kind of mark we leave on the world. And what kind of legacy do you want to leave? Sarah turned to face him, her eyes bright with purpose. I want to create something that can't be destroyed by people like Abdullah. Not just businesses or buildings, but hope. Real, tangible hope that people can hold on to when everything else falls apart. Karim drew her into his arms, understanding in his eyes. That's why I love you. You don't just dream big, you dream better. The next morning, they presented their vision to the Al Rahman International Board. The Sarah Al-Rashid Foundation would work in partnership with the company, identifying struggling businesses and communities that needed support. But beyond just financial investment, they would focus on sustainable development and ethical business practices. We're not just offering handouts, Sarah explained to the board. We're creating a new model of corporate responsibility, one that proves profit and social impact can go hand in hand. The board members were skeptical at first, but the numbers spoke for themselves. Initial projections showed that rehabilitating some of Abdullah's former target companies could yield significant returns while also creating thousands of jobs. There's something else, Karim added, standing beside Sarah. In light of recent events, we believe it's time for Al Rahman International to take a stronger stance on corporate ethics. We're proposing a complete overhaul of our compliance procedures, with Sarah heading the new Ethics and Community Impact Division. The announcement caused a stir, but not for the reasons they expected. Instead of questioning Sarah's qualifications, the board members were more interested in the obvious chemistry between her and Karim. One elderly board member finally voiced what everyone was thinking. "While we're discussing new partnerships," he said with a knowing smile, "are there any other announcements we should be preparing for?" Sarah felt Karim's hand slip into hers under the conference table. They hadn't planned to make their relationship public so soon, but somehow it felt right. "Actually," Karim replied, his voice full of pride and affection, "there might be. But first we have communities to rebuild and wrongs to right." That evening they stood together on the balcony of Karim's office, watching the sun set over the city they were determined to transform. Sarah wore her mother's ring, not as an engagement ring, not yet, but as a symbol of how far she'd come and how much further she planned to go. "Sometimes I wonder," she mused, "if all of this was meant to happen, if I had to lose everything to find my true purpose." "And what is your true purpose?" Karim asked, though he already knew the answer. "To show people that rock bottom isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a new one." She turned in his arms, her expression serious. "But I couldn't have done it alone. You gave me more than just a chance, Karim. You gave me a partner. And you gave me a purpose bigger than profit margins," he replied softly. "We make a good team." "The best," she agreed, reaching up to kiss him as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of hope and possibility. 1 year later, the grand opening of the Al Rashid Community Center marked a new chapter in Sarah and Karim's story. The transformed warehouse stood as a beacon of hope in the neighborhood where Sarah had once struggled to survive. The building gleamed in the morning sun, its modern facilities a stark contrast to its humble surroundings. Hundreds of people gathered for the opening ceremony, business leaders, community members, and most importantly, those who would benefit from the center's services. Sarah stood at the podium, her elegant appearance a testament to how far she'd come. But her eyes still held the same determination that had helped her survive on these very streets. "A year ago, I stood in this neighborhood with a dream," she began, her voice carrying across the crowd. "Not just to build a building, but to create a place where second chances aren't just possible, they're guaranteed, where someone's past doesn't dictate their future." In the front row, Linda dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Beside her sat Mr. and Mrs. Amid, who had been appointed to run the center's cultural education program. Even some of the board members who had initially doubted Sarah's vision were present, now among her strongest supporters. "But this center is more than just a building," Sarah continued. "It's a promise that no one has to face their struggles alone, that there's always hope, always a path forward, if we're brave enough to take that first step." She gestured to the modern facilities behind her. "Inside these walls, you'll find job training programs, educational resources, medical care, and temporary housing. But more importantly, you'll find people who believe in you, people who understand that everyone deserves a chance to rewrite their story." The crowd erupted in applause as Sarah stepped back from the podium. Karim took her place, his pride evident in every word as he addressed the gathering. "When I met Sarah in that alley a year ago, I thought I was offering her a chance," said, his eyes finding hers in the crowd. "What I didn't realize was that she was offering me something far more valuable, the opportunity to be part of something truly meaningful." As he spoke about their plans for future centers and expanded programs, Sarah felt a sense of completion. The foundation had already helped dozens of struggling businesses get back on their feet, creating hundreds of jobs in the process. More importantly, it had given hope to people who thought they had lost everything, just as she once had. After the ceremony, as the crowd toured the new facilities, Sarah found herself back in the alley, where her journey with Karim had begun. The place looked different now, cleaner, safer, full of possibility instead of despair. "I thought I might find you here." Karim's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him smiling, holding something behind his back. "Just remembering," she replied. "It feels like a lifetime ago." In some ways it was. He moved closer, his expression soft. "You're not the same person who stood in this alley that night. You're stronger, braver, though you were pretty brave to begin with." Sarah laughed. "I was desperate and angry back then. I never imagined this is where that path would lead." "Speaking of paths," Karim took her hand, his expression growing serious. We've built something amazing together this past year. The foundation, the community programs, our partnership. But I find myself wanting more. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as he dropped to one knee, producing a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a typical diamond ring, but rather a simple band inlaid with intricate Arabic calligraphy. The inscription says, "Every ending is a new beginning," he explained. "Sarah Al-Rashid, will you marry me? Not just as my business partner or my co-founder, but as my wife, my equal, my inspiration." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, next to her mother's, ring that she still wore as a reminder of her journey. As Karim pulled her into his arms, the sounds of celebration drifted from the community center. Laughter, music, the buzz of new possibilities. Their wedding, held 6 months later at a beachfront resort, was a celebration of both love and purpose. Instead of traditional wedding gifts, they asked guests to contribute to the foundation. The ceremony combined both their cultural traditions, symbolizing the bridge they had built between different worlds. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came during the reception, when a group of students from their first job training program presented them with a handmade gift, a photo album documenting the transformation of lives touched by their work. Page after page showed stories of renewal, of hope restored, of dreams rekindled. "This is our real wedding gift," Sarah told Karim as they looked through the album together, knowing that what we built will continue to change lives. "And we're just getting started," he replied, pulling her close as they watched the sun set over the ocean. "Every ending is a new beginning, remember?" Sarah leaned into his embrace, her heart full of love and purpose. She had lost everything once, only to find something greater. Not just love, but a chance to make a difference in the world. As she looked out at the horizon, she knew that their story would continue to inspire others, proving that sometimes the greatest triumphs come after the deepest falls, and that true love isn't just about romance. It's about believing in someone's potential to rise above their circumstances and create positive change in the world. Fimda Historia. Dear listeners, we hope Sarah and Karim's journey has touched your hearts and shown you that every ending can truly be a new beginning. Their story reminds us that sometimes our greatest struggles lead us to our greatest purpose. If you've been moved by this tale of love, resilience, and second chances, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. We've created a special playlist of equally inspiring stories that you can find by clicking to your left. Join our community of storytellers and dreamers. Leave a comment below, sharing what this story meant to you or how you found hope in your own challenging times. Remember, every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of life. Don't miss our upcoming content. Your next favorite story could be just one click away. We'll see you in the comments.